Now, one of the questions is how much do we teach? How much do we let people lean on the automations versus having them learn the non-automated workflow, doing it manually, becoming somewhat familiar with that before the automation? So it's something we haven't even completely figured out, but also something we're thinking about, where we don't want the team to be weak and 100% reliant on automation when you make someone master a skill first and then use the automation to augment that afterward.
Yeah, super interesting. All right, Chris, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me so much, Aiden. Great to be on.
So, Chris, you've been in SEO for a long time. It's SEO, AEO, GEO, whatever the latest flavor is, but this is your thing. So I thought, who better than to ask the question, how has AI impacted what you do?
AI is impacting search in so many different ways. I think there's probably two primary different really models that you look at it. One is certainly on the operational side, right? Is that basically so many tasks that, might have required someone to do a 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever, whether it's creating a content brief, performing research, a lot of like the actual strategy, even some of the strategy work that we're seeing now is like their AI enables for a lot of automation around that, right? Where, especially, us at Nectiv, we built like a lot of like automation tools around briefing, page refreshing, internal linking, all of that. So there's a layer of automation that's coming in the day-to-day operations, really ever since a lot of these AI models have come out. So that's been one of the big ways. The second way is also just the amount of AI that people now see, like in the Google search results, and other people using like AI to discover products, right? A CMO report came out where they said most B2B CMOs are now actually starting their search on an LLM, and they're actually using Google search. 73% of them are actually using Google search as a verification layer, not a discovery layer. So we're
Oh,
actually
that's
seeing,
interesting.
yeah, especially in the B2B space, we're seeing this huge shift in terms of like how people are starting their journeys, how they're evaluating, especially if they're a buyer of a product, right?
It's super interesting. I agree with you just on that notion when I think about how I use LLM search. So I'll do my research in LLM, but even if I know the name of the company, so say that I figured out I want to talk to Nective, I will then go to Google and then search for Nective, even if it's just to find your URL, right? So that's super interesting.
In that same report, they also said like that's a primary way a lot of like C-suite are using it. They're looking for a company, they're finding the company, and then they'll use Google as one of the verification layers is trying to find red flags for that company. So Google almost serves as a reputation management source.
You know what else is interesting just on that front? OpenAI had their browser, their Comet competitor AI browser, and that was the thing that got me to stop using it. I thought it was really, really cool, but I just needed that navigational. I just need to get to a place very, very quickly that I could do in Google Chrome, and so I did switch back. But I don't know, maybe they fixed that since haven't been back to that browser for a while.
Well, and it's coming. Those actions are full on coming to Google. Yesterday, they just released WebMCP, which basically is saying like it's basically like structured data, but for websites. So they basically can say, hey, you need to mark up your website using these APIs. So like when we add agent features, the agents know where to go to click a form, like submit to like create a reservation, whatever. Like they're actually asking sites to technically mark that up.
Chris, say more about that. I think that's super interesting for everybody to understand. So they built this thing called WebMCP because their view is they want to set the rails so Chrome and maybe other browsers can do a lot more. So based on that, what do you envision that they will do in the browser?
Probably as much as they possibly can, right? In terms, I think they're envisioning a world where someone says, "Hey, I am looking for toothpicks or whatever. I'm looking for new running shoes. I need you to go out, evaluate all the options, and then once you find me the best options, I want you to go and actually you purchase them on my behalf." So they want their browser to be able to do everything from look at a product, navigate a category page, potentially add it to shopping cart, and then they actually have UCP, which allows you to like completely check out. So they want form fills, add to carts, these key actions, right? It's like image views that we would be taking as users. They want their agents to be able to take those actions. And the problem they're saying is right now just based on the HTML layer, the agents are okay at doing that, but not great. But adding the WebMCP will make their agents much more precise in terms of how they're able to actually interface with your site. So it's a very interesting conversation, optimizing for agents as opposed to users, which I think we're honestly heading more into.
So super interesting. So basically, the view is that Google will make everybody get in line. And if you have an add to cart or whatever else, you're going to all do it the same way, or at least put the metadata and so that the agents can understand. So it's just like a common language, just like HTML is a common language. And so the agents can not make mistakes. So it's basically setting the rails for agents. I have this feeling we're not gonna browse websites anymore. I don't know. What's gonna happen? What is your view on that?
I mean, there's a lot of different views, and like especially in the SEO industry, it's been so hey, optimize for the user, and that is still definitely a good practice. I think optimizing for the agents is still undervalued and how important that is. It's like I've heard other CMOs talk about like kind of like treating agents as a VIP customer. I very much agree with that, where agents are going to be a significant user of your site. For many people, probably the primary user of their experience with the web will be done through an agent, not necessarily them browsing the web themselves. And I think we're already seeing a shift like that.
So this is interesting, right? Because I don't know. Are you monitoring traffic to the websites that you're advising or controlling? Like, what percentage of traffic do you see are coming from agents today?
So you'll be able to see agents maybe from like the log files of your sites. We do monitor the traffic, especially like LLM referrals. It's very few though, right? So from traffic from LLMs is nothing. I think I think they have 12% of the LLMs have 12% of the market share of Google, but send 1% of the clicks, if that. Agents you would probably more be able to see from your actual log file data. So that's if you wanted to see that, you could then go and say, hey, ChatGPT user bot, like how many times is it going to my site, right? Then you would actually get an idea of like how agents are interacting. That's not going to be in your traffic data. You'd actually have to get like your basically server access logs in order to figure that out.
Very interesting. So yeah, it's not quite there. And actually, we have an interesting workflow at our company where you every time one of our sales team has a sales call, they ask the customer, "How did you hear about Fellow?" And then the content of that gets posted to a Slack channel that we have. And so I monitor because I want to know how people find out. And the interesting thing is, if we look at the click data of what percentage of people come through the LLMs, it's super low. I don't know if it's like 4%, 3%. It's something very low. But when you look at the conversational data, the number of people that reference ChatGPT or something else is like 30 to 40%. So people are definitely using it, but it's not you're not able to track it through clicks. So this is just I don't know how to think about it. Maybe people will end up underappreciating how big it actually is, at least from someone thinking, is this important? Should we care about this? Do you find people do care, or like do they understand the gravity of this as a channel?
Absolutely, especially in the space we're in, especially in where because we're generally working with like B2B, Series B and beyond, that people are going all in. In fact, in that same study, basically they asked CMOs what their biggest like new investment channel was. Then there was kind of two interesting insights. They went from 0% investment from AEO/GEO in 2025 to 36% of them said they were going to invest in that channel in 2026. It was actually the second biggest investment channel right under AI and automation tooling. So CMOs, especially in B2B, care about it a lot. It's also interesting from another standpoint of like they view it for right or for wrong, they view it as a separate investment than SEO. SEO is not some of them even described it as shifting traditional SEO budgets to AEO/GEO. I have different opinions on that, but it's interesting they're considering a completely different investment category. To your point from earlier, I think actually we know attribution's a black box. The way you're doing it's probably one of the best because like one of the only ways you can even get actual attribution is like self-select. Hey, how did you hear about us? Gong data, like self attribution. That's actually one of the best ways we're finding to properly attribute that for clients.
It's a crazy world. So obviously there's a lot to talk about in terms of how people are finding products and the impact of LLMs and product discovery. But the other interesting thing is, I mean, you spent, a bunch of years at GoFish Digital, which is a larger SEO or marketing agency, right? So how many people work there?
When we were about roughly like 80 to 100 people were there in the SEO division of Go Fish Digital when I was there.
Okay, cool. And so now, and this is such an interesting thing. So you left Go Fish Digital. Now you have your own company focused on AEO and SEO, and it's called Nectiv. And so you're building this thing from scratch. And this is one of the most interesting times ever to be able to build something from scratch. And it sounds like what you were saying earlier is that you're just building a lot of workflow. So you're not defaulting to let me hire someone to do that because that's how things used to be. It sounds like you're first asking, can I build a tool that will do that thing?
100%. And like I'm lucky enough to have a very technical co-founder. My co-founder Jason Melman, he's a full stack developer. Like he came in even before we started, he came in with a site called SEOworkflows.com. That's basically content engineering workflows that he had built from the past 2 or 3 years. So we're coming in with that technology stack already. So yeah, like we're coming and like we're oftentimes, especially for redundant tools, we're looking at like, hey, how do we build that, right? Like, how do we build something that briefs? How do we build something that like looks at a search, like looks at a particular Google search result, goes through the top 10 pages, right? Gives us competitive insights, intel, or something to create the brief, whatever. We're looking at that first. But so we can like really so we can help be more efficient and help our team. But yeah, it's an interesting time because we have the capabilities to build those tools. So like oftentimes our first thought is how do we build instead of how do we hire?
It's very interesting because again, when you really master a field and you really understand it, like you said, you have these workflows, right? If you're going to go diagnose a company and their AEO or SEO strategy, you probably have your 3 to 5 things that you do right away. The signals that you look at, and eventually you hire people and then you try to teach them to do the same things. And so they can now repeat it. You're the expert. The firm is based on your knowledge and then you bring people and teach them. But now it seems like your first action is, well, let me teach the agents. Like, let me actually get my common workflows to be done by these agents and these tools that we're building. And then, yes, if we hire people, then they can just use those things that we've built. And so, yeah, it's very interesting. And again, I think because you guys have started now in this moment in time, you're probably better positioned to build something than if you started this even just 2 years ago.
It's an interesting time to build, but one of the interesting things that we're like me and my co-founder were just talking about yesterday is like, yes, we have the tools and yes, we have this build first approach. One of the things I think we're still thinking through is like, do we still, it's like, we'd like people to know how to do it without the automation so they can, be complete experts on a process, right? Not having to do it without the automations, but knowing the process, right? Knowing how to break it down to clients, knowing how to do it in case something breaks to do it themselves. Now, one of the questions is like, how much do we teach? How much do we let people lean on the automations versus, having them learn the non-automated workflow, doing it manually, becoming somewhat familiar with that before the automation. So it's something we haven't even completely figured out, but like also something we like, we're thinking about where it's like we don't want the team to be weak and 100% reliant on automation when you make someone master a skill first and then use the automation to augment that afterward. It's also, I think, an interesting question for us and probably a lot of other businesses too.
It's super interesting. So I guess maybe we can jump into the demo. So what are we gonna see today?
So we're going to see, yeah, a few different things. The first one I'm going to show you is basically how to use the Ahrefs MCP. Ahrefs is a data platform for SEOs. It has a lot of good different data around like traffic, links, content strategies. It's got all this data in one place. We're going to be able to tap into the MCP to basically use conversational language to get the data instead of having to manually do it ourselves. And that's kind of one of the powers of like MCPs is it kind of unlocks that power. So this is the Ahrefs platform. This would be the data platform where it's like you can see like normally with an SEO doing a task, you go in and there's all these different reports and you get a lot of good stuff in here. Backlinks, organic traffic, top pages, competitive reports. But the brilliant part of an MCP is we can basically have AI unlock all this data for us and use conversation to do that. And that is unlocked via what's called an MCP. Ahrefs has one, and it's actually incredibly simple to set up. Ahrefs has one where you could go
And
into.
Chris, do you find that the MCP that Ahrefs has, is it like super comprehensive and it can do all the things? I'm just curious from your perspective. Has it changed your behavior in that you don't log into Ahrefs as much, or do you still for some things and not for other things?
That's a great question. So I use this, especially for doing like more comprehensive strategies. If I need, I will log in if I need a quick data point, or maybe a single unified report. I'm actually less inclined to log in if I need a lot of data at once, or I need to do multi-competitor comparisons. That's where it becomes a lot more powerful. And this MCP basically gives you access to most of the reporting within Ahrefs. So it's not limited where it's like, oh, you get a couple reports. You get most of the SEO data you need, like via this MCP.
Okay, very good.
And this would be the help documentation, and like I prefer Claude is kind of like my go-to. I think it's the best, I think it's the best at data analysis. That's something I also talk to a lot of people about, is like if you're trying to evaluate someone who's good with AI, it's like they're kind of picky about the AI they use for different tasks. Like I use ChatGPT for a lot of like knowledge-based tasks, but then for like data insights MCP connections, I much prefer Claude because it's it's a little better at that. You get a lot better visuals, it's faster. So that's the connection I'll use today. And setting it up is actually very, very simple. You'll go ahead and start a chat, right? And then what you will do is you'll go in and then you'll actually go into kind of your settings. And then what you will do is you go into your connectors. And then I already have mine configured, but you'll go into browse connectors and you'll add a custom one. And then what you'll do is basically you'll go in and you will just copy paste this, whatever is in the URL that's in the Ahrefs MCP directly into here, and then, or you into your server URL, and then you'll name it, right? So name it Ahrefs MCP, and then you'll add it. So I've already connected mine, so you don't have to do that. And then once you go to like an individual conversation, then you'll be able to actually go in and start using it. So here you'll be able to go and say, okay, I want to go to my individual connectors. You'll go in, make sure Ahrefs is connected, and you want to say, hey, I'm DocuSign. Who are my top search competitors? I can say use the Ahrefs MCP. And then it will actually go and then connect via the MCP in order to start to collect that data for you. And it'll like kind of browse through. A lot of times it'll like ask for permissions and all of that. And then you can actually see like here, it's starting to actually like go and make those requests to what's called the organic competitors report. And now I'm starting to pull in data directly into Claude via the MCP.
Hey everyone, just a quick pause on today's episode to tell you about my day job. In addition to this new way, I'm the CEO of a company called Fellow.ai, and Fellow is an AI meeting assistant. It joins all your meetings, it summarizes them, tracks the actions and the decision, and does that better than any other tool that you've seen. We've spent a ton of time making sure that the meeting notes and summaries and action items that come out of Fellow are the most accurate, the most precise. It beats any human. You have to try it. But in addition to that, what makes Fellow different is that it is the first AI note taker built from the ground up with security and privacy in mind. This means that you can use it for all your meetings, not just the customer-facing ones, but also the sensitive ones, things like one-on-ones and executive team meetings and those QBRs and everything in between. It's got really good judgment. So for example, if you start a meeting and you're talking about some social stuff that you don't really want on the record that's going to get emailed to everyone afterwards, Fellow just knows. It just doesn't include those things. Or say you have something that you talked about and later on you realize, oh man, that shouldn't have been there. It makes it really easy. You can go back to the meeting, select that part, delete it, and then it's gone from the record. It connects to all of the other tools you use in the organization, whether that's Slack or Asana or HubSpot or Salesforce or Linear or Jira or Confluence, whatever it is, Fellow integrates with all those things. I think the best part is that Fellow also acts as an AI chief of staff. Because it sits on all the meetings and the conversations that you have access to, you can ask it really cool questions such as, what are the biggest opportunities in my company? What are the bottlenecks in engineering? And Fellow just pieces together information, sees trends, and it can answer those sorts of questions. It can even do things like, hey, based on all of the one-on-ones that I've had with this particular person, can you create them a performance review? And it can do things like that too. And the sky's really the limit. What I really wanted you to do is have the opportunity to try out Fellow, check it out, and we're making a special offer available to all our listeners. So just go to fellow.ai claude.com/thisnewway to try Fellow. There's a discount code in there for you if you decide to continue with it. Either way, I would love for you to try it and let me know what you think. And with that said, let's go back to the episode. It's interesting, and I see that you're using, this is February 13th, 2026 when we're recording this. I see you're using Opus 4.6. Is that now your go-to in terms of model?
Yes, for data analysis, M8, like for data analysis, this like Google Analytics, the Ahrefs MCP is certainly. I've tested different models, the ChatGPT interface, and well, I think we're on 5.1, 5.2 now with ChatGPT. And just slower. I don't find the data quality as accurate. And as I'll kind of like demonstrate, like Claude can give you some like really nice visualizations, like directly in platform, like visualizations where if I fine tune them enough, like I feel comfortable sharing them in a client presentation or a pitch to, or like talking to the C-suite about like data we found. So Claude is definitely the preferred because its responsiveness is much faster, the data quality is better, and you get like that visual like all in one nice in one place.
Amazing. So it looks like it got the results.
Yep. So here will actually go and say here it's like the top search competitors, right? And like here it's like, oh, Adobe, PandaDoc, Dropbox, Google. So here it's actually saying it'll give us just some basic information. I actually went ahead and ran this ahead of time just because Claude can take a little bit, right? But I was able to do kind of like multiple different reports. One of the most powerful parts of MCPs isn't just like, hey, find this data point for me. Like at that point, you might as well just log into the platform itself and find the information. Where I feel like it gets really powerful is when you start giving it multiple competitors, multiple data points that it needs to bring and blend together, or it has to do some data analysis that you don't want to do like in Excel or something. So this is one of my favorite ones, right? So I might say, hey, we're DocuSign, right? I'm working on their organic strategy. I'm going to give you the biggest competitors. Like they've come to me, they've told me this is who we care about, right? I'm going to give you 4 different competitors. I want you to go to the Ahrefs MCP and then use that top pages report to prioritize it by traffic and figure out like what their acquisition strategies are. It's like a higher level concept, right? Like I'm basically saying, I want you to go to 4 different sites and break down what their content strategies are. And then it might take 2 to 3 minutes for it. But like you can see it gets back like a pretty comprehensive report where like it comes back and tells me, here's all the competitors you analyzed. Here's like the category leaders like PandaDoc. They're doing like how-to content. Oh, they're doing a template library. That's a good content strategy if you're DocuSign, right? Okay, Sign Now, here's their strategy. They're not doing how-to content. They're doing programmatic approach, right? They're doing comparison pages. And then I can get like a specific breakdown of each and every single competitor. I didn't have to go like right through Ahrefs like one by one and plug them into like the URL. Instead, it literally gave me this full complete debrief directly in the platform.
This is super interesting. And does this use the MCP, or is it just figuring this out by just going and browsing the sites?
No, it's using the MCP. So like you'll actually go and see, like you can actually go and see in the results, like you'll actually be able to see like, okay, here's the site explorer for this competitor. Like here you can see here it did like Sign Now, here it did Open Sign, right? I don't know if it labels it up here, but now it's like it's probably doing like PandaDoc. So this is all directly via the MCP. It's not going on the sites, although you might even be able to like actually
But how
prompt it
would
to
it
go.
do the content strategy? That's the part that I'm trying to figure out. So without actually visiting the site, so maybe it gets the URLs, like the top URLs to visit, so that it knows which ones to go to. But how is it able to know the content strategy without visiting it?
And that's so it's basically pulling from data that's available like right in Ahrefs, right? So if I went
Okay.
back to this and I said, hey, let's go to PandaDoc, right? So it's basically the AI, almost kind of what we were talking about earlier. We'll go, okay, I'm going to go plug in PandaDoc. Now I'm going to go to their top pages report, and then I'm going to look at all of their top pages, their top queries, and there it's kind of like, and then through that it's parsing together their acquisition strategies, right? So it's saying, oh, here's a free business plan template. Okay, templates are part of their strategy. Oh, here's like a how to make a signature word. They're doing like the how-to content. So it's looking at this report, piecing together this information, and then saying like, okay, here's PandaDoc strategy, but then replicating that on every single competitor I fed it, but with basically a one-shot prompt.
Okay, super interesting. And And then how is it able to figure out if someone's SEO strategy is programmatic?
So it's probably parsing that together basically probably via its almost own internal knowledge of like how some of these like strategies run. So like it's probably saying like, hey, I'm seeing a lot of templates keywords because it's template, because it's kind of this like formatted approach. It's a programmatic play, right? So like these models are actually pretty good, right, at knowing like what kind of SEO strategies are which. So it's good at understanding what's a local search strategy, what's a programmatic strategy, what's a commerce-based strategy. So the fact it's probably reading those keywords and saying like, okay, he's talking about SEO. I'm seeing a lot of like templates. To me, that indicates some type of like programmatic strategy where they built like a core common template and then just kind of replicated that for different themes, right? So that's one of the ways it knows. It's inferring that based on its knowledge of what it's finding and then probably its knowledge of like how SEO strategies work.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, super impressive. It's you don't. I mean, Ahrefs I would say is like pretty easy to use, but I mean, for a lot of tools that aren't, I mean, this is like the best way to get to use something. But I love this because this is not something that I could have done in Ahrefs without much SEO knowledge, right? To say what is a competitor's strategy. I would have to look at the keywords like you showed, and then, look at the patterns and then really try and glean what that might be. Whereas the model is now helping us do this. So it goes beyond just, oh, it has access to the thing. It has access to the data, and then it can think on top of it, and then give you insights based on like what someone who knew about SEO might say. So I think that part is super powerful.
For sure, yeah, and it's like a lot of times a lot of times the most value is like, hey, what's each individual competitor strategy? And then like also what's that one snippet you wouldn't have found like otherwise, right? Like maybe if I had looked at the top 10 pages of each competitor, I would have found like these three, right? But maybe just a little bit deeper down across some of these, like I wouldn't have found that they're targeting competitors, right? So it's like sometimes it's that surfacing like that 1 to 2 like key strategy pieces that you say, oh, I like might not like if I only review this for an hour, I might not have caught that. Like I might have caught like, 75% of this, but it was able to do it faster and more comprehensively. The
Yeah.
other part that I really like about it is like it can create like these visualizations and aggregate the data in a way that like saves me a ton of time. Like a big thing in SEO is like you want to take all your keywords and then like theme them and like right like okay, we want to group all the templates keywords together and the DocuSign keywords or the e-signature keywords together. You can have it do that for you. Like here I basically asked it to like rate me a keyword universe. So like I basically said like, hey, go in and like create a universe, theme those together, right? And cluster them together. It did that, created these different like keyword clusters based on the information I gave it. And then like there's one of the reasons I like Claude was actually you can actually get like pretty nice visualizations at the end of this and like things like I said I'm more comfortable sharing with like C-suite level people. I might refine this one a little bit, but like based on that clustering, now I've kind of in 30 minutes time not only found the keywords I needed but figured out what are the themes, who's winning in each one, and then visualize that in a way that I can really more form a better comprehensive strategy. So like it's nice for the multi-competitor piece, and it's also really nice for like, hey, go and like analyze this large data set and then aggregate all that information for me in a really quick way.
This is yes, is super cool. So what is the other MCP that you use?
So the other MCP is basically Google Analytics MCP, and the Google Analytics MCP is big for really a couple reasons, right? One, for a lot of what we just talked about, where it's like you can blend kind of conversational data on top of conversation data on top of LLMs, right? But another reason is not know how much you're using it, but people hate Google Analytics for.
Oh my
People will
god, I never
go,
learned how to use it. It's just what a disaster this GA4 is. It's just like you spent years learning an interface and then they just changed absolutely everything. And it's so hard to configure. I think like that's the other thing that people throw up their hands in the air. And so,
people still don't like it. A lot of people just they made the shift like a couple years ago. People like still never really fully learned it, right? So the beautiful part about the Analytics MCP is like you can configure it and never have to go into Google Analytics 4 again for your data, which is just a
oh,
beautiful
I
thing
love
for a
this
lot of
idea. I'm going to
marketers.
set this up today. So, by the way, like, it is an interesting thing, Chris. Can the one of the things that I always wonder about GA4 is like, have we even set it up correctly? So for analytics, now we use a whole series of other tools, and so as a result, I think maybe our marketing team uses it, but like personally, I use I use Heap, and we have a bunch of other tools that we use. But can it tell you if you configured it right? That's probably one of my first questions.
It probably it might not be able to give you. I might not trust it for, hey, are we 100% configured? It'll be able to say, hey, I see data in there and this is what the data is. I think if you configured an errant tag or something like that, it might not catch it. I'm definitely not an analytics expert, hence why I like using the MCP. So maybe someone out there can tell me, but it's going to be able to get the data, analyze the data. I don't know if I would trust it to say, hey, it's tagging, your tags are firing
Yeah.
on every page or
You know, this is
whatever.
where the clever prompting would come in. I would say something like, I suspect that we haven't set this up correctly. What are some suspicious things that you could point to validate what I'm thinking?
100%, right? Or you could even merge it where it's like, hey, here's all of my site data, right? Like here's a crawl of my website, right? Here's all the data. Can you go into Google Analytics and confirm that across all this data set, we're getting at least a session on every single page to ensure I have tracking set up properly? So you could probably even like merge multiple data sets to get better kind of configurations.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode. One of the common things that we hear is, hey, you all talk about all these different tools, you walk through these demos. Sometimes it's hard for me to follow along. We decided to do recently was take all the things that we talk about, put them in a weekly newsletter. We literally list all the tools, we link to them, and any demo that we walk through, we break it down step by step, put it in this newsletter so it's super easy for you to follow along. And the other nice thing is that if there's someone on your team that you think could benefit, they're working on that subject area, they could use a little bit of AI injection into their workflow, send them the newsletter, send them that particular episode. We make it super easy to do that. It's free to sign up. All you have to do is go to thisnewway.com, enter your email address, and you'll get this weekly email from us. Hope you enjoy it. With that said, let's go back to the episode. Love it. So, what kind of things do you do with it?
So basically, it's a little more It's a little more technical to set up. And I'll go ahead and actually use Claude. I'll go ahead and show you via Claude Code. Like Claude Code is actually my preferred kind of choice to use because it's a little more technical. Sometimes it requires a little bit of like troubleshooting even to get started. And it's just fun to ask Claude Code like questions and have it analyze things. So you can do it like anything from like really basic things. Like so, here I went and said, okay, like what's all my traffic? What is my traffic data from the past 30 days, right? And then it's gonna go and give me like some really basic insights. Okay, across like the last 30 days, like here's the traffic data, like here's the date, like here are your engagement metrics, your average session duration. But then what I think is pretty cool is like beyond getting like really basic insights, you can start to ask it like pretty specific questions. You can say like, okay, well, great, that's good to know for that traffic data, but like I want to see, we're in AEO, like, do we get traffic from LLMs to my site? And this is the Nectiv Digital site. It says, yes, you've gotten traffic from LLMs, right? And like, here it is, right? ChatGPT, here's how many sessions. Here's how many sessions you got from Gemini. The page views still small, but it's actually going to give me like pretty nice data on like, hey, are you getting traffic from LLMs? It's actually saying like you have pretty strong engagement. You actually have pretty strong engagement from that traffic. That's really nice. And then you can just start to have a conversation with it and say, oh, well, hey, you Notebook LLM, like that's an interesting one, right? Like someone kind of like, that's generally like a pretty high quality reference. Like, let's say I want more articles to get referenced by other people in Notebook LLM, like, what content got cited there. And here I'm talking about some of the data studies we did, right? Some of like the kind of like thoughts we've posted around the changing search results. So it's really cool to have these like kind of just you can almost just act like it's your analytics analyst, right? And say, hey, get me this data, and I'm just curious about the data in here. Can you kind of tell me more about that? And it will start to give you that information, and you can just really have these kind of natural conversations with the MCP in order to give you those insights.
So this is super interesting. One thing I'm going to rewind and ask you about is, so as you're doing this demo, the first demo that you did was also with an MCP. You used Claude Web, and when you went into Google Analytics, you went into Claude Code. Why the difference? Why couldn't you have done that in the web version?
That's a great question. So one is my personal reason is it's a little more it's like a little more technical to set up. You might even have you might the way they set it up in the demo is they generally run it off the command line, right? So that's also I was just figured because they're having you run it through command line, Claude Code is a little bit easier. Like I said, just due to like the configuration because you basically have to like you basically have to install different Python libraries, that type of thing, like via command line, even to set it up. Claude Code was really valuable to me because if I ran into a hurdle, Claude Code would just debug it for me as we kind of went
Because
along.
it's on your computer, versus, yeah, it's just on the web. So, it's interesting. So, could you actually call this MCP through the web version after it's set up, or it can only work on the desktop?
I believe that's a good question. I believe you can actually configure it through the desktop app. The way to do that would actually be to set up a connector for your Google Analytics, push your Google Analytics into BigQuery, and then from there, what you can do is you can connect your Claude desktop app to BigQuery, and then you can start to ask Claude questions about your Google Analytics like via the web app, via the desktop app. I've even heard people talk about how like they'll literally use the Claude mobile voice app and they can like go and ask like Claude mobile like any question they want about their analytics data, and then we'll ping that BigQuery database, get a response back. So really powerful, and like it's almost kind of having an analyst in your pocket for analytics.
Super interesting. So, I see. So if you wanna do the web version, you've gotta push it into an intermediary source like BigQuery. But if you just want a direct connection, then you're gonna use the desktop. So either Cloud Cowork or Cloud Code.
And Claude Code, like I said, was helpful for debugging, where it's like this is a little less straightforward to set up than the Ahrefs MCP. So it's helpful for kind of like, hey, this is why it's not connecting. Your OAuth isn't set up correctly. Let me go fix that for you. So that's also one of the reasons I value Claude Code here.
Yeah. So Chris, if I did something like said, okay, you know, you now have access to our Google Analytics and you have access to Ahrefs, come up with an SEO strategy for me. How well would it do at that?
Well, and I think that's one of the really where it gets really, really interesting with a lot of this MCP usage, right? Like one MCP I think can be powerful. I think what's really going to expand marketer skill sets is like when you can blend multiple together, right? Because now you're blending data sources, and you're basically running your MCP off two databases, right? It's like here's an example where I said like, hey, go into Google Analytics, look at my landing pages, right? And go look at the Analytics MCP. Then what I want you to do is I want you to go and use the Ahrefs MCP, but look at organic traffic to a big competitor site, right? And I just chose a site that I know has a very large SEO presence, and then use the Ahrefs MCP to see like what their estimated organic traffic data is. Now, can you kind of give me a strategy for like gaps I should build? And then it's going to like look at the Google Analytics data, here you Ahrefs Site Explorer data, and then basically it's saying like, hey, I compared us against a much larger site, right? But it's saying like, hey, here's like here are some of your top pages. Here's some of their top pages, right? And then it's basically saying like, hey, you might want to go build a pricing page. They're building a lot of tools, right? They're building like, maybe an AI, like a prompt optimization like tool. They're a fan out query generator. They're also like, it also actually went and dug in and said, like, hey, here's like the service pages they built, right? They built a small business page, an enterprise page. You need to build those pages. And then if I was being extra curious, I go and say like, okay, like, maybe the one and two aren't for me as much, but service pages, that's interesting. Like I could ask it and say, dive deeper. Give me like 15 different service pages I need to build. Go match that with the Google Analytics MCP to make sure I don't have one on the site. But now it's starting to use those multiple data sources in order to like build me a strategy that I could potentially use.
So this is super interesting, and this is for everybody who is thinking about this. Probably heard the term context engineering. So the question is, what context do you bring into Claude so that it can then, with the right prompt, be able to give you the right answer? And again, these things do not have infinite context, and you have to figure out what things you want to bring in, and so that's where some of the, I guess, like the art comes into the mix, and some experience, like doing this enough and learning how to work with it.
100%.
Very, very interesting. So, thank you for showing this stuff. Very, very cool demos. Since we are talking about tools, one thing I did want to ask you is there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of tools now. A lot of startups that are being built to, help focus on AEO. So, what are you seeing out there? Like, what are the ones that people are using the most? What are you coming across these days?
Yeah, so with AEO specifically, I think there's multiple, right? So one of the biggest, and big caveat is an imperfect science. I still think every business needs one, is some type of LLM tracker. That is the big one. The big player in the market is, of course, Profound. They probably have one of the better user interfaces out there. A lot of the client partners we talk to are using or in talks to Profound. Another one is Athena. That's another one that's like a little bit more data driven, a little bit better at giving people scale. So some type of LLM tracker to understand, like, hey, if we look at our brand across AI search, like, are we getting mentioned, right? Because a lot more people are asking about that. And yes, it's not a perfect science, but if your manager is asking how you're showing up in LLMs, the answer can't be, I don't know. So there are these LLM trackers out there that can help you get that data. I think that's a really big one and going to be imperative for a lot of businesses in 2026 and beyond as well. I think I have a lot of hypotheses around kind of the future of content in our industry. I see organizations hiring less for maybe individual content roles or people creating the content. I actually see the rise of tools like N8N, AirOps, some of these like content engineering workflows that can, potentially 10x the output of a single person by you building an entire workflow around, hey, go ingest this data from multiple sources, create me 20 different outlines. I think these kind of like N8N type of content engineering workflows, that's something I'm very, very bullish on moving forward. I think that's going to be key, especially in our industry.
It's very interesting. Have you any views on OpenClaw as it relates to what's going on? Like, these N8N workflows, it's very interesting. I was having this conversation just this morning, which is, why would you, like, what's the advantage of using something like N8N when you can just, basically ask OpenClaw and give it like a very descriptive prompt and it can, open up your browser when it needs to, go to a different site when it needs to, use your desktop when it needs to, write code when it needs to, and then just solve all the same things. So it's kind of a tricky.
And full transparency, I have not used OpenClaw. I am on Twitter. I have seen all of the hype and the kind of the messaging around it. To me, it's like I'm AI forward. Maybe I'm not that AI forward. I'm like close to giving up that much control. But I do think it's eye opening to see. It's probably one of the first tools that like kind of showcase the world like what is possible in the future with kind of like a fully autonomous solution, a solution that doesn't even require you to build a workflow, a solution that builds that workflow for you.
It's a crazy, crazy thing. I mean, one fun anecdote that I'll mention here is someone asked OpenClaw to book a restaurant reservation. So it tried to use OpenTable, did not succeed because it wasn't listed on OpenTable. So wrote code so that it could build itself a voice component, and then it actually called the restaurant
Oh
and
my
and
gosh.
and booked it that way. So some crazy stuff happening out
Wow,
there.
that is wild. Whoa, okay, that's next level.
Yeah, it's kind of like the thing that you would expect a human to do, right? Because you tell a human, "Hey, book this thing." They would try OpenTable, and if it's not there, they would pick up the phone. But, a great, someone, for example, with not a lot of persistence might just give up. Oh, it's not on OpenTable. Do you want to try this other restaurant? Someone with more persistence would, get up and actually call the place. And that's the thing that I'm finding very interesting. It feels like we're going to this place where there's just that extra persistence. Like they will, knock down doors to get to the end outcome that the user is wanting. And so, when I think about SEO, I now like think about a world where, okay, we did a lot of stuff today. We said, okay, like find our competitors, find their strategy, and I just imagine a world where, like, can you guys, like at Nective, for example, build this like AI SEO employee that we can hire and they can just work at our company and it's going to do these things, but then create the content briefs and then update the site. And it's just going to be this ongoing thing. Maybe it'll feed into our data sources like our sales calls and like whatever stuff we have access to, our product roadmap, even the code so that it knows when we build something new, and then just, do all of this work. And then you guys train these employees. So I don't know, some futuristic stuff, but I actually don't think we're very far from it.
No, I mean, especially with all like the OpenClaw hype, it's like it seems like we're much closer, and it's like, I mean, it's interesting to me the range of people experience. I feel like there's people who are either on either side where it's like they use AI for everything, or they're like allergic to it and like kind of still afraid. But it's like the change is happening so rapidly that it's truly a little unbelievable.
I think as all this stuff happens, and I'm sure you experience this too, because I know you work with a lot of larger companies as well. It's just, when you're in a serious environment, larger companies, private security, like this is the stuff that really matters. And again, it's just the stuff that's top of mind. It just becomes even more top of mind as these tools start running around and connecting to whatever. So it's a brave new world.
For sure, absolutely. I do think they'll get more power. The more data sources you can give AI to access to, the it does become more powerful.
Yeah. So this was awesome, Chris. Thank you so much for doing this. So for people who want to reach out, you're the AEO expert. You have a new company and building it in an AI native way. How do people find you?
Yeah, easiest way, find me on LinkedIn, Chris-Long-Marketing. I post about SEO, AI search, basically 5 times a week. Thoughts, tricks, tips, whatever. Agency name is Nectiv Digital. As Nectiv, you can find us at nectivdigital.com.
All right, Chris, this was amazing. Thanks so much for doing it.
All right, appreciate you having me, Aiden.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of This New Way. If you like the content, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the next episode. See you next time.